Well, hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of Conversations. We are going to be talking about convenience today. I think a lot of times leaders lead in two different categories, and you can't often lead in both. You lead in convenience or you lead in conviction. And I'm just going to give you 7 thoughts around leading out of convenience. This word has come to my brain the last week or so as I've been processing, and I took a week off of this podcast, really thinking about cheap leadership. I think a lot of times what we don't realize is there's a cost to everything, that there's true expenses attached to leadership of quality anyways is expensive. And you can never be a person who wants to make a massive impact but leads out of convenience. Convenience and cheapness produces the results that you don't want. And I'm going to give you 7 thoughts and observations around this concept of just being a cheap leader, that just lead out of a low budget and that I don't care and that I don't necessarily want to produce the highest level outputs and assume that you're going to build anything of significance. Number 1, you're not delegating, you are dumping. That is a clear tell sign that you are absolutely leading out of convenience. Just because you handed it off doesn't mean you led. If you didn't equip, follow up, or stay invested, and that's lazy leadership dressed up as empowerment. You never want to be a person who dumps. You want to be a person who delegates. Those are 2 massively different things. And to be honest, a lot of times in the church space, we don't know how to delineate those. So the high capacity leaders listening to this, you need to be able to define what that means for your organization. To me, delegating, every task has purpose behind it, that there's actual mission attached to it. You're not just handing something off and assuming they have as much clarity, context, budget, whatever. Insert all the variables. You have to understand that they're going to lead with the information that you give them. So if you just say, hey, I need this done, don't assume that they understand what's going on. Assumptions a lot of times produce frustrations, and frustrations lead to resentment, and we all know what resentment leads to. So you got to be a person who understands, I'm not going to dump things on people. I'm not going to dump projects last minute. And a lot of times, again, it's the reactive nature. We'll talk about that in a bit. There really is a reality to delegate. That, man, I'm going to give a mission behind what I'm asking somebody to do. On the other side of you doing this, X, Y, Z, in intended impact. But in the reality of life, hey, I know that this is going to impact people. And always give them an option. Never assume that they're just going to do it. And something that I can't stand is when we just dump things on people, but just assume that they're going to handle it. You've got to let people say yes, and you got to let people say no. Because if you don't do that, you're just forcing something on them, and they're not really leading out of a get-to spirit. They're leading out of obligation. So you're not delegating, you're dumping. That's cheap leadership. Number 2, you're calling it trust, but really it's avoidance. Saying, I trust them to figure it out is noble and wise. But if you haven't trained them, clarified expectations, or coached them through it, you're just avoiding the work. It's, I'm going to do it, we're going to do it, you're going to do it, and that's how you multiply leaders. If you don't know how to multiply leaders, what you're going to have is you're going to have a lot of yes men around you who will do tasks for you for sure, but you just saying, oh, I trust them, they'll figure it out. What a poor way to think about human beings. What a poor way to think about volunteers or people in your church who really are trying to make a difference. You have to look at them and say, I'm going to do this with you. We're going to journey together. It's not about lording over somebody. It's not about managing them. But what you're doing is you're actually trusting them. Trust in itself is mutual, by the way. You can't just say, trust me on this, and then not say, I trust you. You have to train them. You have to clarify expectations, and you have to coach them. And again, dumping says just figure it out. And at the end of it, you give critique on why it didn't work. That's dumping. That's not healthy leadership. What delegating is trusting them to come up with solutions, to come up with ideas, and in the midst of it, being a part of the conversation. Really, if you look at that, that is them being the leader in that situation and you being the follower. And that produces more influence than you think. They're trusting them to come with ideas. Maybe it's a new project that's coming out. Maybe it's a new service flow. Whatever it is, forget church, even if it's just basic leadership in business. Like, trust them and also make sure that in the midst of that, you have trained them, they know their expectations, and you've coached them. Set timelines, make it clear, write it down, and make it as simple as possible. Number 3, you're choosing peace over progress. You keep letting unhealthy culture sit because confronting it feels uncomfortable. That's not leadership. It's passivity with it. We have to understand that peace, sure, is always the goal. But in the midst of that, what you're going to end up having is a fight between those two things. And it really shouldn't be. You shouldn't have to fight for peace and progress. You should look for both of those things. But to be honest, peace is usually an indicator that, one, God's behind us 100% on an individualistic nature. That's a pastoral conversation. Hey, do you feel peace about it? Do you feel peace about that situation? Do you feel peace about that conversation you're going to have? And progress. Hey, progress over perfection. We're not asking you to be perfect. We're just asking you to get better every single day, and including myself. And what you model will get multiplied. So you always have to understand that peace over progress is not the healthy way to think about it. It's peace and progress. And to be honest, if you think about confrontation in itself, you got to have a healthy connotation of confrontation. It should be healthy. You cannot have peace without confrontation. Confrontation produces peace. The healthy confrontation, healthy arguments, healthy tension produces progress, but it also produces peace. We're fighting for peace. We're fighting for unity. We're fighting for a goal in mind, not just fighting to fight. We're caring about things that don't actually matter. So you are a cheap leader if you're choosing peace over progress. Number 4, you're praising loyalty instead of developing leaders. It's easier to surround yourself with agreeable people than to raise up leaders who challenge, sharpen, and grow. Cheap leadership builds comfort zones, not kingdom teams. You want to build a healthy team, a vibrant team, a team that doesn't need you every second of the day. Be somebody who doesn't just praise loyalty. Because again, what you celebrate gets repeated. So you don't want to just surround yourself with yes men. You want to surround yourself with people who are better than you. You want to surround yourself with people who don't think like you, who don't have the same background as you. And having that level of variety and diversity in the midst of your team, what that'll end up happening is everyone will actually sharpen each other, because the end goal is the best idea wins. Whoever has the best idea wins. I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's a team member or if it's a pastor and everything in between in the midst of the organization. Whatever the best idea produces the best results, let's just do that. And having a culture of safety, a culture of trust, a culture of health, and just honesty, I like to always say it like this: there's no elephants in the room. There should never be an elephant in the room. An elephant in the room is everybody knows something, but nobody will say it. You see something and everybody sees it. Everybody notices that person has a bad attitude. Everybody notices that person never shows up with solutions, just problems. But you don't say it. What you're doing is that will be multiplied and reproduced in your culture. So you can't just praise loyalty. You should be developing leaders who, to be honest, don't need you. And yes, honor and loyalty and respect are super imperative in the kingdom of God. So much so, they're mandates, 100%. But loyalty comes from consistency. And if you have to bring people around you who make you feel good about things, that is usually an indicator that you're just insecure. Because a lot of times the people who will bring yes men nature are also in the midst of people pleasing, and they're nervous about pushing back because they think their role will be gone. What that actually is, that is a poverty spirit. A poverty spirit says, I can't do this because what if I lose my role? What if I lose my title? What if I lose my friend. All of those things in the midst of it sure have value, but not more value than your identity. When you lose your identity in the midst of producing loyalty, you're actually not curating a healthy environment. You're producing cheap leadership. Number 5, you're reacting, not leading. If your whole leadership rhythm is putting out fires and saying yes to what's loudest, you're not leading from conviction, you're managing chaos. Been in a lot of meetings in the midst of my 10 years building church where the loudest idea wins, that the person who feels the most confident in the meeting says the loudest thought, and people just go, let's do that, instead of actually facilitating safety and feedback and going, why? Does that translate to the growth or the goal that we're trying to achieve? Doing that in itself, what you'll actually have is leaders, not reactionary managers. Reacting is usually the insanely specific thing that you can look for in somebody to tell you that they're not ready yet. Not that they don't have value, not that they can't make a difference, not that they're not important, not that they can't serve and lead in the midst of their capacity. But if you're looking for high quality leaders to honestly make a huge difference in your organization, whether that's church or not, look for people who lead out of a proactive nature, not reactive. Reactive nature, like I said, they're just constantly putting out fires. They're not above water. Constantly feels like they're drowning. And yes, you're the leader, so lead them in that and help them see that. But also, you can't force them to change at all. What you can do is you can consistently encourage and give feedback. It's affirmation and correction. So it's parenting is leadership, leading is parenting. It's all the same thing. When you think about, I'm going to affirm positive behavior and I'm going to correct negative behavior. And that in itself is an indicator that you are leading out of cheap leadership, that there is a convenience, not conviction, when you have a reactive nature. The last 2 here, you're busy but not building. Running around doing tasks doesn't make you a leader. If you haven't made space to develop systems, disciple people, and shape culture, then convenience is calling the shots. What's funny when you think about church and when you think about building church in 2025, we think about a lot of the things that you would visually see on a Sunday. The stage management, the service flows, the mics turning on, there being quality audio, the live stream, all that stuff in itself is super important because excellence matters. We want to have a great experience, whether that's online or in person. But think about all those things I just listed. All of those things have systems, they have people attached to them, and they actually have culture. Because everything that you create or tolerate is defining your leadership. When you create a system, when you create a leader, when you create culture, that in itself will be reproduced. But if you tolerate a system, if you tolerate a person, if you tolerate culture, that will also be reproduced. So you really want to be super aware of not just being busy, not just running around. Just ask the people that you lead to show them your calendar. Say, can I see your calendar? I would love to walk through your yeses. Because a lot of times in 2025, especially people that lead in a high capacity in church, they do have a lot going. They have families, they have friends, they have jobs. Maybe they even, when they work at the church, they have things going on. And all of that stuff in itself is not bad. But if you don't have the people that all are aligned on the shared values of, hey, this is sacrifice in itself, this is super important, and giving them the opportunity to say yes or to say no is healthy. But if they say yes, we're not busy, we're building. I don't want busy leaders. Busyness is the biggest warning sign to me in leadership. How are you doing? I'm busy. What does busyness mean? That means that you're not effective. You might live a full life. When somebody asks me, hey, how are you, man? How was your week? Oh, I got a full week, because it is full. I have allocated my time to the things that I love, the things that I represent the values of my family. So when you allocate time to the things that are important to you, what you'll find is that you can actually get a lot more done in things that you would have never thought of, that you feel overwhelmed, you feel anxious, you feel like you're saying yes to too much. But if you're not actually systematized, it'll eat you alive. So again, you're busy, but not building. You're not building anything. You haven't built a leader in 6 months. It's usually a problem. You haven't solved a simple solution in 6 months. That's a problem. And us as leaders in our one-on-ones, in our conversations, and even observing them and how they lead their teams, you have to be aware of this, that a person who lives busy, they're not dialed in, they're not systematized, that is always the blinker that they are going to leave. They're going to burn out. They're going to maybe stay, but they're going to cause a negative impact on your culture that will have ripple effects to what you're trying to build. And that's just cheap leadership. Cheap leadership is busyness, and it's not effectiveness. 7, you're asking for fruit from trees you've never watered. If you're frustrated with your team, but you haven't invested in them, trained them, or corrected them, don't blame them. Blame your convenience. Blame the cheapness of that. Because again, you have to look at inputs and attitudes. That's all that you can control. You can't control the outcome of one person on your team. You can't control them leaving in 6 months. You can't control their attitudes. You can't control anything about another human being. That's manipulation. But what I can do is I can control my inputs and my attitude and spirit towards them. I want to have the best attitude about people. That happens in the prayer closet, by the way. Praying about people, praying about your team, praying for them, prophesying over their family, speaking life to them, not even when they're around, in your mind, and even to God. God, I'm so thankful for so-and-so. I'm so thankful for blank. I'm so thankful for the gift inside of them. So you're asking for fruit from trees that you've never watered. So you're looking at somebody and you feel frustrated that they've not developed, they're not outputting the thing that you thought they had in them, but you never watered it. Everything rises and falls in leadership, right? So if you're frustrated with a team member and you haven't invested in them, an actual investment, like actually invest in them, not once every 2 months, not once a month. Actual investment, actual discipleship is sacrificing real time, real sleep to spend time with them and love them and cherish them. Train them. Are you actually training them? People need 2 things. They either need a coaching or they need a coffee. That's it. And that's the easiest way to think about leadership and each person that you lead. They need a coaching or they need a coffee. If they need a coaching, that means they have the culture, but they don't have a skill. If they need a coffee, they have the skill, they don't have the culture. And those 2 things always go hand in hand. You either need a coffee or need a coaching. And that's it. And that's the easiest way to think about building people in its simplistic nature. I need to get a coffee with them. I need to hang out with them. I need them to catch the spirit of the thing because they have the skill. They just don't have the culture. Or maybe they have culture. They're fun to be around. They're vibrant, but they don't necessarily have the skill gap. Great. That's easy. Get them on a YouTube video. Get a training for them. Something that says, I'm investing in you. Not to say I want something out of you, but I want something for you. I want health on your team. I want health in your marriage. That is actual long-term fruit. And you might not see it, by the way. And that's the beautiful part of leadership. These are the 7 indicators that your leadership is cheap. You're delegating. You're not delegating. You're dumping. You're calling it trust, but really it's avoidance. You're choosing peace over progress. You're praising loyalty instead of developing leaders. You're reacting, not leading. You're busy, but not building. And you're asking for fruit from trees you've never watered. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. We'll see you next week.